Hello, beautiful souls. Hello and welcome. Self-Love Talks with me, Tara Love Perry. Mwah. Blessings and love to all of you. I have to start with an apology. My dear sister, Anaya Sophia, was due to be on with me tonight. And we're going to be talking about how to maintain, how to hold the divine feminine energy at this challenging time. And unfortunately, she's just had to cancel. She's in an overwhelming situation. She can't be with us, which is such a shame, but we're going to send her loads of love. She's literally, I'm on the southeast coast of France, and she's right over on the southwest of France. So just send some love over to the southwest of France for Anaya Sophie to support her with what she's going through at the moment. And also, I'm really going to plug in deep and talk to you from my heart and talk to you from a deep understanding in myself, and also the transmissions that have been coming through to me from the core of the divine feminine, the Mother Earth herself, about how to really hold our own energy and hold the energy of the planet right now, hold the divine feminine energies in times which are at some points excruciatingly challenging. I mean, over here in France this week, some of you may be plugged into the news or not. I'm not actually plugged into the news. I heard this through other people, that the president of this country is insisting on 100% mandatory jabs for everybody, and certain workers, care workers, won't be in jobs unless they have it. And even down to primary school children of all ages, even primary school children, if they want to go back to school in September, they all have to have the experimental therapy that's being given out, the jab therapy. And I find that incredibly challenging information. It's not just happening in France. This is rolled out in other countries already. And if it hasn't yet come to your country, you know, that looks like it's the agenda. That's what wants to happen from certain people that have assumed authority over the rest of humanity. And sometimes it looks really scary, frightening to people that our liberties are being stripped away, our liberties are being taken away right out of our hands, that we're not allowed to travel, we're not allowed to see loved ones, we're not allowed to, you know, go shopping without adhering to these laws. And we can imagine that, having seen what's happened in the last 18 months or so, from what this was, how do you say, this was told to us in the media, that this of what would be happening to us as a humanity in like 18 months ago, what would be happening, it's stretched and distorted a million miles from what it originally was. So if we continue that stretch, how far is it going to go? How far do these people in government and these people in power and control, these people with the big agendas and the big bank balances that are perpetrating these acts against humanity? And I want to say it's acts of terrorism, acts of pure greed and selfishness that is not really at all for the highest good of one of us, let alone the entire planet. So if we continue to stretch what's already happened from the beginning and what we were told this was, what was propagated, what was put out into the media, and where we are now, we can see that this is not going to go down a happy route, that more and more liberties are going to be taken away, less and less freedoms and more restrictions. And at which point do we say enough is enough? And even, I know many people have been screaming enough is enough already throughout the several lockdowns, saying that they, you know, people are cracking up. People have been through pure hell through this. It really is terrorization. And how do we manage that? How do we deal with that? What can we do? And I just want to say, I feel you. It's, you know, sometimes I think people might think, I'm a spiritual teacher. I'm all about love and self-love. And perhaps sometimes people might think that that's naive or fluffy or, somehow transcended from the rest of the human reality and what's going on. That's absolutely not true. I think to be a spiritual teacher at this time means something completely different to what it meant many, many years ago. And that is, spiritual teachings is not how to sit on a mountain and become enlightened. It's how to live in this human body, exist in this very dense third dimensional reality and love it, and bring our full presence, full body, full divinity, full awareness, full consciousness, full beingness into every little particle of matter in the third dimensional world. I mean, there can be no more separation between spirit and earth, or spirit and matter, no more separation between what's spiritual and what's practical, because the most spiritual thing that all of us have in our lives is our breath. We literally inhale spirit. We literally inhale pure prana, pure divinity, pure unconditional love. That is, of course, oxygen and hydrogen, but we're inhaling that on a very practical level and a very spiritual level. And without it, our spirits do not exist in this form. We are formless. We are disembodied. So the spiritual and the practical are absolutely one with each other. There is no separation. It was only separated in old teachings that I don't feel are relevant anymore. If they were relevant then, they're not relevant now. And so to live in this world and to walk a spiritual life is to really feel everything that's going on, to become aware of all things and not shut out the darkness and only look at the light. And there is darkness here. There is darkness. And darkness is where the light is yet to shine. It's just simply a shadow area. It's an area of ignorance. It's an area of sleep state. It's an area of unconsciousness of humanity as a whole that we have not yet awakened to. So more and more people en masse are awakening to this shadow state, the shadow of humanity. And there are a bunch of people living in the shadows of humanity, those places we don't dare go in our minds, or we don't dare shine a light on for fear of what we're going to find, and for fear of how we're going to react when we find it, in that we may feel completely ashamed or guilty that we didn't look sooner, or just not good about ourselves, essentially, unlovable. And that's why people fear to look in the shadows. So for those of us that have people in our lives who are not, it's being termed now the Great Awakening, that are not waking up, that are not having the awareness or having the courage or having the love, the consciousness to go to the shadow zones of human consciousness, to go and look at the shadow areas on this planet where people have operated in the shadows and had control because of our ignorance, because of our sleep state, because we didn't want to see it. That's the only reason they have control, because it's in the shadows. And there are those people that don't want to see that, or they're not ready, and that's okay. We can just bless those people. And at the same time, there are more and more and more of us who are looking and who are seeing. And we have to transmute that. We have to transmute our feelings and emotions on a very visceral, tangible, practical human level of how we feel when another law is passed, or another agenda is passed, or another person is killed, or another right is taken away from us. We're going to experience that physically. And it's really important that we go through the whole process as human beings, because this is about our awakening. And for us to awaken individually as sovereign, unique, beautiful, divine beings, when we see the stuff that we're not in harmony with, that doesn't sit well with us, that's been in the ignorance, we're going to have layers of awakening. And the feelings of anger, rage, disgust, shame, fear, that's all part of the process. And so you're still a spiritual person, you're still on your awakening journey. If you're experiencing those emotions, the point is not to get stuck in them. that it is an awakening process. It's a journey, and you're not just stuck in that fear, because if we get stuck in the fear, we go straight back into ignorance and we'll try and cover it up again. Or if we can't manage the emotional discomfort that we're feeling for our awakening, we will just numb it, stifle it, blank it out, do anything to disconnect again from it, because we don't feel powerful enough to deal with it. And it's just really important to go through that kind of mental emotional process. And even the physical processes. A lot of people are experiencing symptoms of nausea right now, or not being able to sleep and then not being able to wake up as well, like having crazy sleep patterns. This is all part of the awakening process that you're going to be experiencing mentally, emotionally, and physical. And so what came through for me as I was sitting here, I was expecting to have a conversation with Anaya Sophia, and I was going to ask her how she deals with this and how she embodies the divine feminine, or works with the divine feminine, holds the divine feminine energy in challenging times. So I want to share that with you. So I just sat here asking, okay, what needs to come through today for the highest good of everyone, all of us, feeling these different varieties of, maybe some people are in the trust and they're like in a clear space today, and other people are in a desperate space today, or an angry space today. There's a great big, what's the word? I'm finding it hard with my words today. There's a lot. The easy way of saying that. There's a lot going on. Okay. It's been intense, guys. It's been intense. So if you've been feeling the intensity, just know it's not just you. We're all feeling it. And earlier today, I was just sitting here asking what needs to come through. And I have this wonderful experience. I'm going to share with you a memory that it brought up for me when I had this experience just now. But the experience was of this can play out in the mind, right? And I get this vision coming from Mother Earth, Gaia, and her and I have a chat fairly regularly. And she showed me where all the energy, certainly for me, a couple of days this week, was really up in my head, right? I was feeling super stressed, just going, I want to get to England. How am I going to see my kids? How am I going to jump through this hoop and this hoop without losing my integrity, and like with staying in my sovereignty, and move through these challenges, right? So it really stressed me out for a day or two this week. And so what she just showed me is that actually when we're playing this out in our heads, playing out the scenarios, whether it's the survival scenario or the fear scenario, or whatever future projected scenario that you've got going on in your head, or however you're trying to problem solve this yourself, that energy is being trapped and wasted up here in the mind space. It's actually not going anywhere. It's only, if anything, creating more ripples of chaos and disharmony out there in the field. And we might know this. You might be smart enough, conscious enough to know this. And so I just want to say this as a reminder, not to point a finger at you and to judge you, but just to remind and go, as I remind myself, so I remind you, that's not conducive. It doesn't help me, it doesn't help the planet, it doesn't help anybody. And simply to come back to the breath, which is pure and simple every single time, which is pure spirit right there, not abandoning you, your divinity, not abandoning you. We don't have to wait for our star brothers and sisters or our divinity or our gods out there to come down and rescue us. We have this divinity right here that comes to us in a breath to receive that. And remember, just keep receiving that like a waterfall of your truth, of your divinity, right there, delivered to your doorstep, right to your threshold, for you to open and receive. That's always a choice. That will be your first conscious choice, is to breathe and receive. And your second, well, what happens then is it brings your awareness from your mind down with the breath, because as you receive the breath in, it draws your attention down to where the breath is going inside of you, which is in and down. And that's like an invisible elevator that brings your awareness deeper and deeper and deeper, landing you down into the bottom of you, your base center, your base chakra energy, and your earth energy, right? Where you meet the earth, where you meet your birth on this planet. And that's how to put your seatbelt on, if you like. That's how to strap in, touch base, connect in with the divine feminine, the divine mother. And just know, many, many years ago, I was working a lot with divine will and human will and the solar plexus energies and doing lots of readings around that, soul readings, and lots of teaching around it. And I very, very clearly heard the masculine divinity, God, the sunlight, the golden light, the unconditional love in the divine masculine form, said to me that her will trumps all. What he meant by that is that God gives free will to us. And I don't mean God as in the entity God, I mean God as in the unconditional love, divine masculine, gives to the children, to his children, free will. The will of God is the will of the divine child. You know, as we choose, so it is done. We've been given that power. So it's up to us. It's not God's will that these things are happening. God gave us free will and allowed us to choose. Such was his love. And his will is his command is at our bidding, at our will. That's how the universe works on that level, on the divine masculine level. Choice. And as a fail-safe, because the father knows the kid is going to create havoc, the child learns through destruction. Think of a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old, they'll destroy everything in sight as part of play, as part of self-discovery, as part of their self-realization. It's a huge part of the child's learning process. You can't take that away and expect the child to develop and grow and learn. We all must go through those phases of destruction, wrecking things, wrecking the place, and self-destruction in order to initiate into our powers and be the creator, divine creators of our reality. We learn by duality. So it's a super important gift that's been given to us. Now, as a fail-safe, Mother Earth, the divine feminine, the divine mother, her will trumps ours. So when the mum says, that's enough destruction, come home now, come back to my arms, come back to me where you're safe, that's what goes. So it's really wonderful just for me to sit down here and plug in and be reminded of that. God told me that a long time ago. And this is the other part, the memory that came up a long time ago. I was sitting on the hill of Tara in Ireland, part of my namesake actually. And my kids were really small at the time. There was a big protest going on around the hill of Tara at that time to stop roads being built through it. And I went and sat up on the hill. And I had this beautiful selenite crystal one that a friend had given me, and I tapped on the earth 3 times. I don't know why, I just did it. And I said, hello. And I heard hello back from Gaia. Gaia herself, first time I'd ever heard her speak to me directly, not through a soul reading where I was kind of channeling for somebody else. And I was like, whoa, you're real. And so she spoke to me and she used that word Gaia, that name Gaia. And I asked her what needed to happen, how to help with what was going on way back then, which felt like, you know, a lot of destruction, which is certainly supremely mild compared to what's going on now. And she said that the golden grid, her golden blueprint, we all know that there's ley lines and energy lines across the planet. We all know that a lot of those has been sabotaged and hijacked by religions, putting their temples there, building ring roads around cities, around it to stop the flow of those natural ley lines, those natural meridian lines or energy lines in the planet, in the Mother Earth, of her natural grid, of her blueprint. But it's okay because Her blueprint is unconditional love, as is ours. Okay, we can't come from a mother and have a different blueprint. We have the same blueprint as her. Her blueprint, her template, the structure. If you think of a cell in your body, it has a physical structure. It has the protons and the neutrons and the electrons and everything else. It's got physical structure to it. But inside all of that physical structure is an energetic structure that was there first. The template, let's call it the intelligent or divine creator template of all creation. And we know that these templates are created in sacred geometry shapes. It's complete harmonics. It's the language of light. It's the language of creation, is geometry. And that's why we call it sacred geometry, when it's put together in the divine proportions, in the divine way. So, or in the sacred way, it's done with sacred intent and creation, as were we created with sacred intent and creation. So the Mother Earth has her template, has her energetic field in the earth itself. Much like if you think of, the grid paper that you have in your maths class, and then you can draw your diagrams on the grid paper because you've got the reference underneath. The earth template is like that. Her creation is built on top of an energetic template or a blueprint that's encoded with all her lifespan's activity encoded inside of it. So this happens in a certain year point, this happens in a certain year point, this happens in a certain point in creation. They're like little, timed, coded activations that happens, like ding, 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 certain time, ping, then it opens, and it's done. And a certain event will happen on the planet, or a certain energy shift or an energy change. That's coded into her blueprint as it is in ours. And what she was showing me is that even though there's been a direct sabotage, whether it's building roads or building new places of worship that are hijacking the divine feminine energies on her grid lines, that it's been activated so massively, especially in the last 20 years, and is so activated right now, like the volume being turned up and up and up and up on the frequency of the unconditional love. So it's no longer an underlying low level, subtle level of divine feminine energy and the unconditional love of the mother, and let's say the beacon call home, right? Coming back to what I was saying about the mother, when she says enough is enough, come home now, you can't do that anymore, I'm not going to let you hurt yourself anymore, come home. Her call, her beckoning home beacon call, the volume is being turned up. And it gets turned up gradually, so it's not a shock. So we don't have a shock awakening, because that's not an awakening. That's trauma. So all of this has been done with precise divine timing. It has to be done slowly and gently. And of course, even though on an earthly level it feels slow and gentle, it is slow and gentle, on a human level, how we're experiencing it is actually super intense. So we're recalibrating constantly to new levels of intensity, new frequencies of unconditional love. And as this grid is being activated inside the very fabric of the planet herself, just imagine on a dimmer switch, right? You've got maybe the Christmas lights. Imagine it like that, like a huge big matrix of Christmas lights inside Mother Earth. The dimmer's really, really low, so you don't notice it very much. Bit by bit by bit, the dimmer switch is turned up, and it gets brighter and brighter and brighter and brighter and brighter and brighter. So bit by bit, you're noticing all over the planet, these little lights are lighting up. And those little lights are us, because we are plugged in to the divine feminine template. We're plugged into the divine mother blueprint. We are her, she is us. You cannot separate that bond between a mother and a child. There's umbilical links to her energetically, constantly, or we wouldn't be in our bodies, we wouldn't exist. So as she turns up that volume, as her will becomes more prevalent and more dominant, let's say, all my children come home to me. We're experiencing this as a revelation, as an elevation into higher frequencies, which is challenging, especially when we're seeing something through our mind that looks like a certain situation is playing out, you know, a divorce or a separation or a missing a loved one or a freedom taken away. That's the perception through the mind. And simultaneously, we're having this elevated vibrational frequency coming through our bodies. So the two don't sit very well together. You have to get rid of one. You know, you can't have an elevation of energy and still hold on to a fixed perception that doesn't resonate with that. I hope you know what I'm talking about. So yeah, Rikisha, you're having crazy sleep patterns as well. Yep, and nausea. Yeah, loads of us are, sweetheart. You're not on your own with that one. So essentially, she's turning up the volume. Let go of what we think is happening in the mind. And that's not to say sit back and do nothing or just think that magically everything's going to be okay. We're still completely participatory in this. We're not just totally passive. And it's a funny thing to understand. It's a complete paradox because we have to completely surrender into the divine feminine, into the Mother Earth herself, and not just blindly, naively trust in a disconnected way, but plug in and feel her. And that's where we're held safe. It's like driving with your seatbelt on. You know, you're plugged in and you're safe, and she has you. Now, whether or not you have your seatbelt on, so to speak, you're plugged in, she's got you, but you're going to have a much easier ride if you plug back into her and you stay connected with that mother. You're responding to the homing beacon. You're responding to your call home to yourself, to your true nature, which is the unconditional love in matter, in the divine feminine form, which is conscious matter. This is you, the divine in the human. This is you. And she showed me this many years ago, sitting on the hill of Tara. She showed me the elevation, a bit like seeing the grid rise up through to the surface of the planet and then just completely obliterate every other fabricated man-made agenda that had been cemented over the top or satellited over the top or, you know, 5G'd across the top, whatever it is, or institutions that are holding different kinds of religious ceremony, which are not for the highest good of humanity, on her grid lines, that she, with her energy field, it just blast through all of it. That light will just blast through every single bit of it. So she just reminded me of that, and I just felt it in my body, felt that energy grid, that I am like a little, think of yourself like on the thread of Christmas lights. In fact, I have some, wait there. I'm going to plug them in for you. Oh no, I'm not. There's too many things in my plugs. But look, I have some fairy lights here. And think of yourself as one of these little lights on this big, big grid of lights. And as that dimmer switch comes up, your little light is brighter and brighter and brighter and brighter. And that's happening to loads of us. And yes, sure, some people, they need to change their bulbs. They need to just unscrew their head, punk, and then get another one, screw it in so that they're working. But essentially, all of us are connected into this grid. So that is happening. Surrender into the divine feminine, connect to your Mother Earth. Simply say, hello, Mother Earth. And breathe and receive. Bring your awareness down, connect into her. And feel, start tuning your sensitivities and your awareness to feel again. because you're designed to feel, you're designed to be super hypersensitive, and that's where your superpowers lie. Okay, that's how you evolve your consciousness. So if you're one of these people that's been numbing out, or they just can't handle the emotions, learning how to feel yourself, learning how to feel the energies, learning how to move through these emotions without blocking or trapping or controlling them, but just breathing through and being with them, integrating everything into one whole version of you, one holistic you. That's the way to do this with ease and grace. That's how to do it with the Divine Feminine. And I want to say at the same time, the Divine Feminine is fierce. She will say no. And the Mother knows how to say no. She must know her boundaries. She knows what's not right. And there's a fierceness to her, and we see that in eruptions on the planet. We see that in volcanoes. We see that in storms on the ocean. We see that in her weather patterns. We see that. But it doesn't mean that there's a malice behind it. It doesn't mean there's a judgment behind it. It just means no. And it's about new creation. It's about destruction of the old and creation of the new, because the Divine Feminine is constantly dying and rebirthing. She is constantly, we see it in nature all the time. We see it through the seasons. There's the winter and then the spring. So that's how things move. So destruction of the old is necessary. And so there's a lot of destruction at the moment because there's a lot of new coming through. So when we see that destruction of our rights, or destruction of the innocent, or destruction of our old way of life, that's a beautiful thing. That's the winter on this age, the old age, the dark age, and the subservient age, the sacrificial age, the false prophets age, the serving an authority agenda, whether it's an institution, a government, or a false god age. That's all old and it's done with. We're in the last throes of the winter of that, and with the beginning, the spring of the next. So it is coming. And if you feel to contribute to the destruction of the old, not with anger, not with malice, not in fear, because that will just have a boomerang effect and come right back at you and have the reverse effect that you want it to have. If you want to be in action and support and enable the destruction of the old and the birth of the new, do both, birth and destruction, not just one, don't get stuck in one. But that destruction might look like in letters saying to certain GPs or MPs or anybody that's on your radar to say, I am not supporting this agenda. I am saying no. Maybe you're being forced to take something or coerced into taking something or doing something that you don't agree with. This is where you can just say no. No, I'm not going to do that, because it harms me. It harms my loved ones, and it harms humanity as a whole, and I'm not going to do it. No. And allow that voice of the Divine Mother in you that says no, that will protect the children on this earth and that will protect the inner child in you. That is just no, this is not conducive for you. It's not good for you. It's not healthy for you. So don't do it. Allow that, and it can come up with a flare. It can come up with a rage like a volcano. It can come up in a storm. You can growl, you can be fierce. And I fully encourage you to go through those emotions as well and find the creativity in it. So there's always a creativity in the destruction. It's not destruction for destruction's sake of like, sod it, okay, just want to destroy everything through anger. That's anger and hatred and fear that does that kind of destruction. This is constructive destruction. This is new earth. You know, this is empowering to you, where you find your own boundary and you find your own no, and you stand in your no. And through that, a new path will be forged, a new opening will be made. And so I fully encourage you, I fully encourage everybody to find their no and stay in it and have faith in it and hold space for your own boundary of, this is not okay for me and for the children and for all life on this planet, for my fellow human brothers and sisters, for my animal friends. No, it's not happening. No, not anymore. We have to take this stand, because if we don't, it follows into the next generation. And then we're basically abdicating our power and saying, I couldn't do it. Sorry, kids, next generation, you deal with this problem. That's not very empowering for you. It's not very grown up. It's not very loving. So we all have to take that responsibility. Let's all find our edge. Let's all find our no. Let's all find our way of saying, I will not comply. And in that space, hold the space, breathe with it, feel it, own it. And how can I be creative through this? Now, ask yourself that question. How and what can I create from this? A way through that's done from a place of love and from a place of power, place of consciousness, because that's what will create the new solutions going forward. It's a beautiful thing to do. So I hope that helps. That's my message for today. That's what came through. I had no idea when I got started. I thought I'd be chatting to Anaya Sophia, but hopefully another time we'll connect with her. And I hope that made sense and that it helped. So just know the dimmer switches are being turned up. Let your light fully blaze. And in your blazing light, you will be no. This, like Gandalf, I was watching Lord of the Rings the other day, you shall not pass. And he stops the darkness with his light, you know, and he puts his staff down and that light just ripples out and all the shadows are thrown back. So let's just do that together and say no and forge our way through. And I love you. You're not on your own. We're all in this together. Big hug. Mwah, mwah. And thank you for watching. Please share and like, subscribe, all that stuff if you want to help get this message to more people if it helped you. Alrighty, thank you and good night. Mwah.